screwed up my lights. I pushed the button, like I've got the button on the Stream Deck, which is meant to make everything go into like presentation mode. So the neon's here and the neon's here and the neon's under the desk. And the two lights on the roof are meant to go neon as well. And they won't come on. And I'm in this like nasty troubleshooting loop of trying to figure out why my lights won't work. And just tweeting the live link now. So I'm going, okay, I do the IT thing, right? Like turn it off and turn it back on again. It'll be fine. Now you turn them off, they drop off the network, because if I'm turning off the power, then there's no power to the device. So it's no longer controllable over IoT. No problems. Turn it off, turn it back on again. And then I'm like, okay, I will open up. So these are Wiz lights. I will open up the Wiz app. And so long as I can see them on the Wiz app, I know they've got connectivity. Can't see them on the Wiz app. Okay, so that's that. This is the troubleshooting that is required just to turn my freaking lights on. So then I go to, oh, see, now that's interesting. I went into my Unify network and I looked for the lights to see if they're actually on the network at all. And they were. And now they're not. They've just dropped off. And I don't know why. No, really, IoT makes your life a lot better, honestly. So anyway, that's one of the little troubleshooting things. To be honest, out of all the lights in my house, these are the ones that I kind of trust the least. I just don't trust this whole Wiz ecosystem and even the integration. I'm trying to figure out how the integration into Home Assistant ever actually worked. You ever look at your own code and go, how did this ever work before? Because I've got, like in my lights.yaml, I've got platform Wiz lights. Doesn't that mean there should be a Wiz integration somewhere? Because then I've gone back into Home Assistant and I don't see a Wiz integration. Now, if anyone's sitting there going, I wonder if I should IoT my things. No, honestly, this is really good fun most of the time. But I'm now at a complete loss as to how this ever worked. Maybe Wiz is like one of those native things that's built into Home Assistant, like Have I Been Pwned, and then you don't have to add another integration. I'm just totally confused. Anyway, there's enough light. So I will come back to that after this weekly update. First things first, sponsor this week is 1Password. So my favorite password manager and an organization I'm now on the advisory board of as well, which I've spoken about before. So probably no surprises that I'm happy having 1Password up there. And that's an organization I'm obviously going to be spending a lot more time with over the coming months and hopefully years. It's interesting to start to think about what am I actually going to do in 2021. I think we've probably all had a little bit of trouble just thinking past the mess that has been 2020. But anyway, I'm sure there will be a lot more 1Password in that as well. Okay. Oh, my things are dinging. That's Scott. All right, I can get rid of him. Looking at the comments as well. So thanks for people who are joining in from your respective locations. Where are we? New Hampshire, USA, Johannesburg. Haven't been to South Africa yet. Texas, been to Texas. Philip McNeely is blaming the lights on DNS. It's always DNS. Part of my problem as well. Yeah, have just like one of those rabbit holes where you find one thing wrong and then there's another thing wrong and then there's another thing wrong. My laptop had completely lost connectivity this morning. Everything else was okay. And then I noticed I had alerts from my Unify network that one of my access points had dropped off at like 4 a.m. or something. No, the UDM Pro itself. So the actual thing that does all the routing and DHCP and all the rest of it, so it could be DNS, had restarted. And then I noticed that my Protect service that runs on the UDM Pro is not running at the moment. So that stopped sometime last night as well. So you just start going down this rabbit hole of all these different things that have stopped and not worked. And when I tie this back to the big series I did last week around IoT, and particularly when I was talking about how do you make it work for normal humans, it does make me wonder, how does all this stuff work for people that can't delve into the network configuration and see which devices are no longer talking on the network, or which ones are having trouble phoning home, or whatever it may be. It is a bit of a mess. So I did ask on Twitter before I started this live stream. I said, look, has anyone got stuff that they want me to cover today? Because my content is a little bit light, but I'm going to talk about a couple of things that I do have content-wise first. But if there's anything you want me to cover, because the messaging here is about 20 seconds delayed from my talking, drop it into the comments here so I see everyone's comments. If you want to cover infosec stuff, tech stuff, I think someone asked for car stuff, I'm happy to do that. I'll talk a little bit more about my upcoming travels as well. Drop it into the comments section there. I've got an hour to kill anyway. Might not need all that. So there are a few things this week. Now, number one, I just tweeted this. It's Have I Been Pwned's birthday today. And today is the 4th of December. We are in the future for people watching this from Europe or the US. So 4th of December, 2013, I started Have I Been Pwned. And I was a little bit tempted in the tweet I just put out about it to put one of those, well, that escalated quickly memes, because it kind of did, like it was 155 million records or something when I first launched it, and I thought, wow, that's a lot. Actually, I've got the launch blog post here, introducing Have I Been Pwned, aggregating accounts across website breaches, and it was 154 million accounts. 152.5 million of which came from Adobe, and then there was like Stratfor, Gawker, Yahoo, and Sony, and that was it. And it started with, just a really, really simple little thing. And I'm just constantly surprised at the fact that it's lasted this long, and because there's obviously lots of data breaches and there's demand. And I'm constantly surprised it's been successful. I'm constantly surprised at the places it turns up at. I think if someone had told me that there'd be all these governments on board using it and it would be part of the syllabus at universities and that I would have gone to Congress, and that some of the other stuff that's coming up that I haven't been able to announce yet, but some cool stuff coming up, that would have surprised the hell out of me. So I'm very happy with where it's actually gone, and there's a lot I want to do in the future with it as well, particularly around making more data available to more people, more organizations, to do good things after the bad things happen. So that's a massive thing. Now, where will it go from here? The open sourcing is still moving ahead. There is one discrete piece of Have I Been Pwned which I'm working on the open source roadmap for, with a combination of, I'm trying to pick the bits I want to say at the moment, a combination of a good discrete use case where I'm actually going to need some help building some bits and pieces, and also a combination of the right backing to help make it open source. Now, what do I mean by that? I've not run an open source project before. I'm honestly worried about, am I just going to get like bombarded with pull requests? How do I still corral the masses that want to actually help and contribute into the direction that my vision goes, and how do I get their vision into it as well? How do I change the deployment pipeline so that it's stable? So there's a whole bunch of different aspects, let alone the whole thing about, okay, well, what's the right open source license to use for it as well? There's a whole bunch of different bits in there that need to be solved. It is not as simple as just going, yep, here's the keys, and the whole thing's open and everyone goes for it. So I am getting good support, I'll say that much. And I think it's going to, well, it's definitely not going to be a this year thing now, because I'm about to go on holidays in a few days. But it's going to be hopefully an early 2021 thing. And again, the first use case I've got is just super, super cool. I'm really looking forward to what people can do with this. So that's definitely still on the roadmap. Other things, I think I'm going to wait and see how this progressive open sourcing piece goes. How much support do I get? How much overhead is there still required from me to run the thing? But I really want to start filling in backlog. So I want to fill in things like the number one requested feature in the user voice is to support plus aliasing or sub-addressing, as it's also called. So instead of being like john@gmail.com, you're john plus netflix@gmail.com and john plus spotify@gmail.com. And then if you start getting spam to the plus Spotify address, you know who linked your email. Now, there's no support in Have I Been Pwned to both normalize those addresses, so take out the plus Spotify, but also be able to indicate that it was Spotify that leaked your data if that happens in the future. And the reason it hasn't been done is because it's a lot of hard work for a bunch of reasons. And there's also a very, 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 very small percentage of the population that actually uses that. So high effort, low return, but very important to the people who do use it. So that is something that I want to get done in the future. A lot of this as well then comes back to the whole issue of protecting the underlying data too, because I don't want to have a situation where anyone gets access to data that they shouldn't. We are talking about code here. There is never going to be an open sourcing of the email addresses, let alone the entire data breaches in terms of the data itself. It's always going to be the code and the infrastructure and stuff around it that makes it happen. But that doesn't stop people asking for that either. Not going to happen, but that is one of the things that comes up. So I've got to think about, how do I make sure that we maintain the privacy of individuals as this whole thing opens up more too. So that's about as much as I know moving forward. If I'm honest, I've never really done a lot of planning for Have I Been Pwned. I've just sort of done what makes sense each day. I mean, even now, like, all right, I've got a backlist of data breaches to load. I might get around to loading a breach today. I want to go wakeboarding. so this is still a hobby project I do in my spare time. This is not something that I am sort of mandated to put in X number of hours per week. So we'll see. But I am happy being able to run it in a way where I get to choose what I do and I get to choose the direction of the service too. So not having accountability is kind of nice as well. I'm going to talk about something else in a moment. Let me just have a look at some of the comments here. I'm going to come back to these comments actually. So I'll kind of leave it right there and talk a bit about my a tweet, which I did not expect to get this much traction this week. But given the level of crazy in it, yeah, I guess I can see why it was popular. All right, so I think what I could most charitably phrase as some batshit crazy emails. I'm going to give you two examples. This is the one that got the most traction. So I get this email. Now, this is real. I do not make these up. Some people said this person is trolling. The problem is, I think there's a fine line between trolling and just being a dickhead. You know, like trolling is like, I'm deliberately being antagonistic. Being a dickhead is, well, you don't really even think about that. You're just a dickhead. I think this person was the latter. So this person emails me to my personal email address. They say, first of all, the topic is my business 2021. Here's the email. This is what is exactly wrong with our world 2021. I picture you, a person in California, and a liberal pain. What right do you have to tell me what my password should not be? It's mine. So what inspires to tell me to keep changing it? Mind your own business. Typical liberal. Capital L, liberal. This time the first one was a lowercase l. Must have been bullied around as a child. Yes, I am a red Texan and American, and I say what my password will be. This is America. ... This is just all levels of stupid. Anyway, I went back to the guy. I don't normally go back to them. I normally just file these, but this one I was kind of pissed about. And I've said, I made 7 bullet points. Number 1, it's not 2021 yet. Number 2, I live in Queensland and last voted Labor. So in Australia, we have a Liberal Party and a Labor Party. Now, I don't think I actually voted Labor, but I just wanted to put it in there just to mess with the guy. I doubt he even knows where Queensland is. Number 3, I haven't told you what your password should be. Like, how did he get here with him thinking that I told him what his password should be? Maybe he was signing up to a website somewhere and they used pwned passwords and he tried to use something stupid, MAGA 2020 for argument's sake, and it said, no, don't use this because Have I Been Pwned says it's bad, and then he like tracked me down to complain about it. Number 4, my business is online security and I mind it very carefully because he told me to mind my own business. Number 5, never bullied at school. I really don't think I ever was bullied at school. Number 6, yes, I am a white Australian. What's a red Texan, by the way? Is it a Native American thing? Is it a political allegiance thing? Is it redneck? I don't know. Number 7, this is Australia, ... So anyway, he didn't reply after that, which is a bit of a shame because it would have been fun. So that was like batshit crazy email number 1. Now, the next one. Oh, God, the things I get. The next one here is someone else who emailed me. And again, like as best I can tell, these are legitimate. So the person says, hi, when I logged in to HIBP, not quite sure how they logged into it with there's no login, but maybe they meant they put their email address in. That was it. It says my account, capital M on my, there's a pattern here with grammar and spelling. My account has been pwned, P-A-W-N-E-D, and lists your site as the source of the breach. So they went to Have I Been Pwned, somehow logged in, and Have I Been Pwned listed Have I Been Pwned as the source of the breach. Please remove this email from any of your data or I will be forming the necessary law enforcement agencies. I can give them a contact if they like, that might help. They all use Have I Been Pwned anyway. This needs to be adhered to now. You have until Friday to comply. Now, this is Friday, at least by my clock. Not gone to jail yet. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe once Friday hits in the US, I'll get a notice. I don't know. Look, I usually just file these away. I did reply to the Red Texan guy just out of curiosity, but yeah. So anyway, that's been my week, just getting stupid emails like that. All right, so I'm gonna come and have a read through the comments just here, and some of these are going to refer to things I was speaking about earlier. Oh, look, something else on my PC not working. Oh no, there you go, it does work. My Fancy Zones didn't work. For those who haven't used it before, Fancy Zones is super cool. It's part of the Microsoft Power Tools, Power Toys. Where's Fancy Zone? Power Toys. And Fancy Zones allows you to create, you know how like you can snap a window to different windows, or you can do windows left and right and it just like snaps to half a window. So Fancy Zones allows you to create your own zones within a monitor. So you might say, I want to divide my monitor into 3 columns. And then you hold down the shift, was the shift key? Yep, hold down the shift key, drag the window, and then it snaps into those positions. Because I've got the ultra-wide monitor here, I've created Fancy Zones that divided into 3 parts. So I get 3 almost square windows that fit across it. So I was just trying to snap my YouTube window over to there. But Fancy Zones, very, very cool part of Microsoft Power Toys. All right, looking at the comments here, Big H. Where do you see a security landscape going 2021? From an SMB point of view, what do you think the bad guys will be focusing on? We've seen a big shift in phishing this year. Ransomware seems to have been a big one this year. And I think what's interesting with the ransomware stuff we've seen this year is it's been a combination of encrypt your files and pay Bitcoin for the password or for the key, which of course some organizations do, such as Garmin has been a big one this year. But we're also seeing that, I mean, that is an availability problem. So your files you simply don't have access to. But we're also seeing this transition into risks around confidentiality as well, because these organizations are saying, pay the ransom, otherwise we'll start leaking your data. Now, this is what happened to Toll in Australia, where they went, no, screw you, we're not going to pay it. So they just started leaking the data. And that's kind of concerning, because now you're sort of getting the double whammy, right? It's like availability and confidentiality. By the way, if you pay to solve the confidentiality problem, you have no guarantees that the attackers have actually deleted the data and they're not going to just go and dump it somewhere later on publicly. So I think we'll see a lot more of that. It'll be interesting to see how dependent we remain on remote workforces next year. I can't, I'm sure most of you probably have the same view, but I can't see a point in the foreseeable future, so in the next 12 months, where we're back in offices working as normal. Well, I never will be, but like for most people, I can't see that happening. So I think the risks we're seeing around things like insufficiently secured teleconferences, although people are starting to actually work that shit out, which is good news, because it's not that hard to do. So we'll see. I think it's going to be very determined by what actually happens with this pandemic situation as well. All right, what else is in here? Shiny Doc, how's your relationship with NordVPN going? Anything you can say it? It's going good. We chat pretty regularly. I've been giving them some input on some material that they're creating at the moment. I've certainly been feeding back things that people feed to me in terms of anything around marketing, messaging, or pricing or stuff like that. So we do have those discussions. I hope some of those things are starting to have an impact. It is early days because it's only been, what, 3 months? I don't know. It all becomes a blur this year. So I would like to look back at it, particularly as I get to sort of that 6-month time frame and go, okay, well, what have we been able to achieve with this? You know, is the marketing on key? Is sort of the use cases for the product meeting expectation? And all I mean by that is, you know, earlier on I said some of the issues I have is that some of the marketing's been too aggressive. We know this because we've had the Advertising Standards Authority in the UK say the same thing in the past. So are they actually getting that on key, and are we making sure that the good stuff that VPNs do is the stuff that is actually rising to the surface in terms of the marketing messaging, and some of the stuff that might have been the marketing folks getting a little bit too carried away is pushed further into the background. So I'll definitely take a close look at that, and I'll obviously share my feelings on that later on when I get into the new year. What else is going? Hello from Lagos, Nigeria. Cool. Now, this is a place I haven't been yet, too. A few other things in here. And again, if you have, just for those who have since joined since I said this, if you have any questions or other things that you would like me to cover in this update, then do please let me know. There's a Texan thing in here. Oh, scroll past. Okay, oh well, there's lots of Texans here. Texan. We Texans do not claim him as one of us. So it's funny how quickly we distance ourselves from people that claim to be of our origin. You know, if there's an Aussie out there being a dickhead, I don't want anything to do with them. Trust me. Okay, in the US, red is Republican and blue is Democrat. I just don't know what that has to do with passwords. I think that's the thing which is confusing me. Okay. Compliance reward. Garmin really did pay the ransom. Yeah, they did. And of course, the interesting thing with Garmin is that it looks like it was this collective known as Evil Core who had who was the ransomware crew. And Evil Core has US sanctions against them. So paying Evil Core is potentially creating much bigger issues than just the fact that some of your things got ransomed if you're paying an organization or effectively doing business with an organization that is on a sanctions list. The other thing that's making it quite interesting with ransomware, I was listening to the Risky Biz podcast yesterday, and if you don't, you should be listening to the Risky Biz podcast. And they were talking there about the impact on things like cyber insurance. So much ransomware going on at the moment. What does it do to cyber insurance policies, and what does it do to premiums there? And on the one hand, like, insurance is the most boring possible thing you could talk about. But on the other hand, it's kind of interesting insofar as when we talk about insurance and premiums, cyber insurance companies want to incentivize organizations not to have data breaches, because if they have data breaches, including things like ransomware, and they have to pay out the insurance policy, that's not good for the insurance company. So what can they do for organizations to help them drive down their risk, which is a little bit like when you go for car insurance. It's like, is the car garage? Do you have any really young people driving it? Like, what are the things that you can do to decrease your risk factors of having to make a claim? And if cyber insurance is like the lever that gets organizations to do a better job of their insurance things, then I'm actually kind of okay with that. All right, still going through the comments in here. What else is in here? Hello from, well, Kosovo. Cool. Another place I haven't been yet. Kosovo? Kosovo. Huh. Either way, I haven't been there. Christian Anderson, are you better at wakeboarding than Scott at snowboarding? Yes. I've got video of Scott eating it big time on the wakeboard. I also got video of Scott eating it big time on the snowboard too. So there you go. Texans are all about barbecue, armadillos, and Tex-Mex. That's it. Burton, are you mad that you bought a PC that is old now compared with the latest processor and graphics card? No, because that's just what happens with technology. So everything's old very, very quickly. It doesn't bother me in the least. Burton also says, what's the temperature at the moment? I heard Australia had a heat wave. Well, all right, so I'll talk a little bit about my upcoming holidays and some of the places I'm going and the temperature range there. So here on the Gold Coast where we are, and I'm just pulling open my weather forecast here. So this, of course, is all in Celsius, as all the modern countries are. And our forecast for today is 31. Tomorrow, 30. 33, 33, 32, 26, 25. So this is probably 2 or 3 degrees warmer than normal. We are in summer now. Summer for us starts on the 1st of December. So that's quite warm here. But then we're going on holidays. Now, we're going on holidays next week for over a month. So I'm going to be doing a bunch of these on the road. I do still intend to do these in different places. And if you can picture Australia, those of you that know what Australia looks like, we're sort of doing like a counterclockwise loop up to the top and then sort of around through the middle, down to the bottom. Now, this, of course, is assuming that COVID doesn't close off any borders and we have a big drama. But at the moment, our rates of community transmission are very, very close to zero. And I think in this state, it's been over 100 days since there was. The places we're going, we're not going to any capital cities or anything like that by design, are pretty solid. Anyway, round through the middle, doing the whole Uluru, previously known as Ayers Rock kind of thing, around through South Australia, Victoria, around back through the snowfields, which do still have some snow at the moment. So we're sort of going from a range of all the sort of seaside tropical stuff is going to be 30s most of the time. And as you go north, it gets a lot more humid. You do go above the Tropic of Capricorn as well into proper tropical areas. And then if I look at somewhere like we'll be going through Mount Isa. Part of the problem with this trip, and it was just one of these things where everything just kind of escalated out of control in terms of the duration. But part of the problem is if you want to go from the coast to the middle, proper outback stuff, there's very little stuff in between. So we're looking at the map going, okay, we've got to get from this point here to this point here. There's a couple of 1,000 kilometers to drive. So you can't do it in one go. You've got to stay places. Where can we stay where it doesn't look like we're going to get murdered if we stay there? Because it all feels a little bit Wolf Creek. If you don't know what Wolf Creek is, do a Google for that movie. It'll give you nightmares. So when I look at places like Mount Isa, we're going through there, that's today's 41, 43, 42, 41, and then it gets into the cooler temperatures, 38, 39, 41. We'll be in Alice Springs. So what's it like in Alice Springs at the moment? So Alice Springs is very much the middle of the country. That's 41 today, 42. So that's toasty. I'm going to be in Coober Pedy. Now, the fun thing about Coober Pedy, and incidentally, I've never been in the Northern Territory and I've never been to South Australia as well. So I'm going to see a bunch of stuff I've never seen before. Coober Pedy, a lot of that is underground. So it's a super hot mining town, but just looking at it now, it's not too hot. It's all in the 30s. But I was looking at it the other day and they were like 46, 47 Celsius. So that is, that's a lot of sort of carved out rock underground. So even when I booked the hotel, it's like, look, I want to stay underground. I want to stay under the ground, like in the rock. So that's going to be an interesting place. But then also coming back through Thredbo in New South Wales, which is where I'd normally go snowboarding, they have got a low at the top station. So we're going to hike up Australia's highest point. They've got a low of -1. So I think the total sort of temperature range within the one country in places we're driving to is going to be maybe up to sort of 50 degrees Celsius. So we do have to pack quite a bit. It is about a 9,000 kilometer drive before the detours and things we do in other places. So I think we're going to rack up about 10,000 K of driving. So it's kind of an epic trip. But to be honest, even before the whole COVID thing, we really just wanted to see more of Australia and less of the overseas stuff. I mean, I spent 242 days, I think, traveling last year, mostly overseas. So this is going to be obviously just in Australia, although across multiple states, just over half of it with the kids as well before they fly back. So a bunch of family time, which would be really, really nice, and just sort of seeing things that I have never seen before. And look, I'll be posting photos and things like that and trying to do some live streams if I have connectivity. Otherwise, I'll just have to record some of these updates like I used to do and publish them once I find a connection again. All right, so let me have a look at some of the comments here, and then I'm going to go and look at the responses when I tweeted just before and said, what do people want me to talk about? Because I actually haven't looked at that yet. So everyone is, Australia has snow. Australia has proper snow. Like, we have a relatively decent snow season. The challenges we have is that, look, it's almost like saying, wow, America has snow, but don't you have like desert? I was in Death Valley last year. It was 47 degrees, but they also have snow. And remember, Australia is about the same size as the USA. It's a fraction smaller. So that's the size of this country. But yes, we do have snow. This year I would have been snowboarding, posting photos of snowboarding, except COVID literally meant we couldn't leave the state. So that was off, postponed until 2021. So hopefully I'll be posting photos of the snow then. Okay, what else is in here? All right, so let's have a bit of a look. I did get some feedback I saw, which I haven't really read yet, about things that people wanted me to cover today. Someone here says, what's the fire season like this year? How bad is it compared to previous years? So far, not bad at all. So we had a really bad fire season last year, an absolutely catastrophic fire season. And this was just before COVID hit as well. So Australia got, well and truly smashed. So at the moment, not too bad. We have had a bit of smoke here because Fraser Island, which is the world's largest sand island, it would have to be a couple of 100 kilometers north of here. That's had some pretty bad fires. I've had to evacuate a lot of that, which is just a double whammy for those folks because they're really dependent on the tourism industry. So after COVID, just as our states have started to open up again, to then have that is really bad news for them. So there have been some fires around, but so far nothing like what it was last year. Someone here says, want to talk about your cars, especially the GTR. Do you have bikes? If so, bikes too. So I still have the R35 GTR. Many people know that, and the E63 S AMG, which of course is going to be the car we're doing this long trip on. It does worry me just slightly that there's no spare tire, and it's just like a can of goo, because that's what a lot of cars have these days to save all the space which a spare tire would take up. So that's going to be interesting. But I did have bikes. So the last bike I had was a GSX-R 1000. It was just the fastest bike I could buy. It got stolen about 15 years ago, and I took the insurance and I put it into my Subaru at the time, and I just went and did a lot more track days. Because frankly, the bike, for those of you that have ridden fast bikes before, the speed is just something else. I think the GTR might be the only thing I've driven that kind of comes close to it. But I was going to lose either my life or my license on that bike. So I felt that it being stolen was maybe a bit of a blessing in disguise. Okay, so there's a couple other questions here. What apps and other shortcut automations have you got on your phone or watch? So the only things I've got on my watch at the moment is I've got play ABC radio, so I often listen to the ABC radio every morning, and then play Jazz Vibes, just to play. It's just like if I want background music, which is relaxed. And then I've got one other here, which is just to play the bedtime scene. So the bedtime scene is the one that I've got an Akira button, which is single press, will do the same thing, and it just turns off all the lights downstairs and the ones outside and all that sort of thing. So they're the only ones I've got there at the moment. But then I use Home Assistant on the watch, and I call her name that cannot be spoken without waking her up to do the same thing, which is usually just to open or close the garage door. And I use that really extensively, even if I'm like taking the rubbish out and I've got rubbish in my hands. I'll just go, hey, what's her name? Open the garage door. Questions here about talking about what's planned on Have I Been Pwned. I think I'm sort of covered that. Someone says here, how you got into infosec? Your first experience was infosec. Oh, and of course your Skyline, which is Nissan, which isn't actually a Skyline. It's a GTR, but that's a semantic argument. So I got into infosec after having been in web development for a long time. So I started developing for the web in about 95. early. And I was a developer for many, many years. And then when I was in my corporate life at Pfizer, the folks making the vaccine now, good on them, I ended up transitioning into an architect role. Now, many of you have probably been in this position before. It's like you are a software developer somewhere. You like building software. It's fun, but there's no career. So Pfizer's view was, if you want to progress in your career as a software developer, you need to stop doing software development and you need to become an architect. And the thing that really always pissed me off about this is, well, I like building software, so why do I have to do this other thing in order to get a pay rise or some more seniority? Because you get older at a constant rate, but you can't necessarily progress your career. This is one of the things I just hated about corporate life. So anyway, became an architect. And when I was an architect, I missed building software. And that's really when I started writing the blog. So in 2009, I started the blog. And that was the way of scratching an itch. Now, as part of that blog and as part of my architect role, I was responsible for a lot of organizations who were building software and delivering it into the organization. So Pfizer's view was, software developers, like many of you, are expensive. So we should fire them all and we will outsource it to low-cost markets, save money, job done. Now, this was obviously an accountant with an Excel spreadsheet and no idea of what they're actually doing, because it was a disastrous bloody thing. We just kept getting so much crap software back. And I'd spent a lot of my life going through the crap software and telling them everything that was crap. And one of the things that was consistently crap was security. And I got to the point where, having no dedicated security background myself, I was like, okay, rather than continually telling people the same thing, I'm going to start writing this in this blog, which I've just started but had no real direction on yet. So the big thing that kind of got me set on that security path was I wrote up the OWASP top 10 for ASP.NET. So I literally just went through the top 10, and I had this idea in the shower one morning. Like, that was literally it. I was like, I'm going to do this. I think it took more than a year in total to write the series. And then that got me the MVP award as well. And it's like, oh, okay, well, it looks like people are kind of interested in this stuff. And that was the beginning. Now, I just had a flashback. I'll give you an idea of the sort of level of sophistication of the people that were building this software and the sort of degree of problems. So I remember someone creating a mobile app, and at some point there was authentication required. And they've sort of built this mobile app. I've loaded it onto my phone. I've proxied the phone through Fiddler, and I'm looking at the traffic, and I can see that there's an API called Get Users. Now, and in fact, I think what it was back in the sort of WSDL days where you could go to your web service definition language, you could see all the methods and things that implemented, and I found a method there called Get Users. And I discovered all this just by proxying through Fiddler. So I go back to the developers. These were developers in China. And I said, look, all I did is I proxied my phone through Fiddler, and then I found this method which exposed all the users, including their plain text passwords. And I kid you not, the response from the developers was, that's okay, our users don't use Fiddler. So I no longer work there. All right, so that is how I got into InfoSec. And incidentally, I think technology in general, and possibly InfoSec in particular, people come from really, really diverse backgrounds. It's actually kind of cool. Like, it's not like, how did you get into medicine? Well, I went to university and I studied really, really hard for many years after getting exceptionally good grades at school. It's like that is the normal path. But InfoSec and IT in general, we come from all sorts of different areas. Okay, what else are we looking at here? New things. Since you're doing a driving holiday, sat-navs, phone, which apps versus car integration between them. So the Mercedes I have has CarPlay. Now, I think CarPlay is a fantastic idea. I think some of the execution is very, very rough. But what I love about it, compared to, say, my GTR, when I get in the GTR, because it is now really a 13-year-old model and my car is just about to hit a decade, which is really old, there is no CarPlay integration or anything like this. So what I typically have, and I don't have one at the moment, is like a phone holder, and the phone goes up there and the phone is sitting in front of your face, and there's always that temptation to touch it. And even for things like controlling the sat nav, because the built-in sat nav is absolute crap compared to, say, Google Maps, even touching the sat nav, I think you're allowed to touch the nav and the music controls on your phone in Australia if the phone is mounted. I'm not even sure. I probably should check that. But you're not allowed to do anything else. Like, you can't be there driving along or even stopped with the handbrake on at the traffic lights doing Twitter or anything like that. But when the phone is sitting there on a phone holder up there, mounted somewhere, there is always that risk. The other thing is, particularly in that car, this doesn't stay in place very long. Compared to the Mercedes, like, I get in there, I pick up the armrest. I've got it does require a wired CarPlay connection. The BMWs, and I'm sure other models as well, can do wireless CarPlay. Does require wire CarPlay, so I plug in the lightning cable and I close the glove box and the phone stays in there. And now I've got all the CarPlay stuff on the screen. Now, there's several problems with this. Problem number one is that this car, which is approaching 3 years old, about 2.5 years old, does not have a touchscreen. so it's got a nice wide screen on it, but there's always the temptation to touch the things. Instead, you've got to use the Mercedes controls, which are either like a touch pad or a little rotary dial, or on the steering wheel, there's a little touch-sensitive thing you can hit with your thumb. All of them are really clunky ways of interacting with the screen. Newer models of Mercedes, such as the new A classes, they do have touch screens, and you can just do exactly what intuitively makes sense. So if you're wanting to do something like go between a map and, so, playing a podcast via the podcast app on CarPlay, it is clunky. It's not ideal at all. But at least you can ask her, whose name I cannot speak, and she can change stations for you and things like that. The other problem I have, and maybe this is just an issue with Mercedes implementation, is that constantly I plug the cable in, I put it in there, I drive out, I'm waiting for the map to come up, map doesn't come up. I have to pull over somewhere, stop, unplug the cable, plug it back in again, and it gets a connection. It's not just a cable either, I've rotated multiple cables. Other times what will happen is things like I'm say walking back to the car, I open up my phone, I go to Google Maps, I put in the location and things I want to go to, start, okay, that's fine, get in the car, plug it in, and then Google Maps comes up, but it's like frozen. It's just frozen on that one screen. I'm driving, and now I'm literally driving, because in my mind I'm like, oh, I'll just pick it up, it'll be fine. But the map hasn't changed, and I have to unlock the phone and have the map open, otherwise it doesn't work, which is just ridiculously stupid. And I've said multiple times, between multiple swear words, that I actually think CarPlay makes driving more dangerous when things like that happen, because now you're driving off, you don't know which way you're going. Was I going left or right here? I need to get the phone out, I need to unlock it in order for the map to update, otherwise I'm stuck here in traffic not knowing where I'm going. So I think that's very rough. And then in terms of look, I would never buy an external sat nav now. I would always use something that is built into the mobile device. And to be honest, I think this is what makes sense, right? I think it makes sense, just like it makes sense to have my TV downstairs being dumb, but a great big panel. And then let's put all the brains in the little Apple TV. And next year, if they release a much better one, I pay a few $100 and I get a new Apple TV, and the great big panel there can get, I don't know, maybe we'll get a decade out of that. So in the car, let's put all the smarts in the device here, and I just want a screen that I can interact with. And that's the value proposition of CarPlay and Google's implementation as well, same sort of thing. So I'd like this to have all the smarts and also to have the apps. So I do use Waze a lot as well. So Waze is good in terms of like community contributions of everything from where there might be accidents, debris on the road, car pulled over somewhere, speed cameras, which would only matter if you were going over the speed limit anyway. So stuff like that. So Waze I find to be very useful as well. All right. Someone said, this is a fair question. It might be too niche for your global audience, but I'd like to hear your take on the tech job scene around the Gold Coast area. I am an infrastructure architect currently consulting in Melbourne, considering a move anywhere between Ballina and Brisbane. Honestly, I have very little idea of the job scene anywhere because I don't have a job. I honestly don't know. It's not something I look for. The Gold Coast, so that the city I'm in here, there's about 700,000 people here. There was a period there, probably about 15 to 20 years ago, where they really wanted to become like a tech hub. Can we make this the Silicon Valley of Australia? And it's never really lived up to that promise. So the most tech jobs are probably in Brisbane, which is an hour up that way north. I wonder if this guy is asking the question for the same reason many people at the moment are looking at moving up here, because further south, particularly down in Victoria, a lot of people after the COVID second wave down there apparently are saying they want to move up here, which now mind you, we could always have a second wave here too, but at least you'd be warm at the same time. Okay, I'm just trying to find something else of substance in here. What else is there? Red, blue states, American thing again. All right, so I'm going to look at the comments over here in the live chat, and then it might be time for me to go and do other things. Eric Goldman, did you get a refund or something for the trip you already paid for? I think Eric's talking about my snow trip. So I booked to go to the snow in January. So in January 2020, when I was in Norway, I booked a snow holiday for August, not knowing what would happen. Now, I paid a 50% deposit, and then I think about 3 months out, when COVID was a bit of a mess, but things were actually improving, I paid the remainder. So I'd paid 100% of the trip. And then I booked the lift tickets as well, because what happened is the snowfields, normally it'd just be like, yeah, there's unlimited lift tickets, but the queues might be longer sometimes. So what they did this year is they had various releases, and they would only release certain days and certain volumes. Anyhow, I managed to get all the lift tickets, and I was pretty happy. It's like I got all the lift tickets, I paid for the accommodation, COVID's relaxing a bit, and then things started to spike again. And unfortunately, the accommodation said, look, because my state has not, so my state, Queensland, would not let, say, people from New South Wales, where the snow is, would not let them into the state without quarantining, all this sort of stuff. But if you're a Queensland resident, you can come back in without quarantine. So the hotel or the chalet accommodation said, look, we won't refund you because technically you can come. And we're like, this is just, particularly with kids as well, there's just too much risk. So I said, no, look, we just have to pull the pin on it. And then several days before the accommodation was due to start, because of the way COVID was going, our state said, no, look, you actually can't travel. So because they said you can't travel, fortunately, we managed to not get a refund, but we got a credit for 2021. So we now need to book time in 2021. We got the lift tickets credited as well. So we now have a fully paid snow holiday for 2021. So this is the trick with COVID. It seems like accommodation, at least here in Australia, if COVID is prohibiting you from being able to take the trip, we're seeing credits. And I hope that there's no uptick in COVID for this massive trip we're about to do. But if it is, my expectation would be we get a credit for that as well. Thoughts on hackers testing COVID vaccine supply chain? Pretty shitty. This is a question from Morgan. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because if we take the emotion out of it, and I realize I just responded in an emotional way, but there's a huge amount of value in information around things like vaccines, and particularly when we look at value to the likes of commercial entities. And we have seen a lot of commercially motivated hacking, sometimes state-backed. We won't speculate about which countries might be doing that. I can see the value in that, but I think where all of us don't have much sympathy for this sort of behavior is that it is a global pandemic. It is something that affects all of us. So I think that what we would like to see is everybody working together to try and solve this problem and to come up with a vaccine. But I can see why that would be a valuable target. Okay. Let me see what else is here in the comments that I can actually speak to. So that's a good question from Burton. Has the break away from traveling changed your prospection about future plans on traveling to conferences, like more breaks, less travel? So, good question. So my situation's a bit different, and I've written previously about the personal things in my life that kind of influenced my travel last year and changed things this year as well. And to be honest, before COVID, I just got to the point where it's like, I'm home now. I've got the kids around. I've got a new partner. I want to have stability and consistency in life. I just don't want to be doing all this travel. So the plan was always to dramatically reduce my travel footprint. I thought I would still be doing it, particularly because Charlotte's Norwegian, and like her family's there, her friends there. She hasn't seen anyone there since Feb. So my expectation was I'd still travel to some degree, but of course that hasn't happened. So my feeling now with the COVID situation, and as well for personal reasons, if I don't travel again for the foreseeable future, travel overseas, I'm quite okay with that. If I don't travel overseas at all in 2021, that won't bother me in the least, other than the situation with Charlotte not being able to see her family. That's very hard when you just can't get access to what's familiar to you. Now, a lot of stuff has gone online. So many of the things that I would do before that I'd travel for are online. And that's a double-edged sword. So I still run workshops. I still do conference talks. Those things which I did either for fun or for commercial reasons before, I still do, but I don't have to leave this room. Now, there's the two sides, the fun and the commercial bit. The fun, frankly, it's boring. It's sitting here doing a conference talk or doing a workshop is painful. There you go. I said it. It gets painful. Now, not so bad with, say, a conference talk, because it's like basically how long I've been talking for now, and there's slides and there's fun, and I've done enough of them in person to know how the audience is reacting, so it's okay. But doing a 2-day workshop, which I divide down into 4 half days, when I say it's painful, it is a one-way feed of information. I'm giving stuff out, I get very little back. So very often people don't have cameras on. Most of the questions come through in text format as opposed to an audio. It just gets very, very Groundhog Day. But the other side, the commercial side of it, is I'll still charge the same amount of money, if not more in many cases. So that's great, but I don't have to travel, so I'm not consuming all of that time on airplanes, so I can do more, and I don't get jet lagged. And literally while I'm doing a workshop, when I break it into half days, in the middle of one of those half days, so after like a quarter day, I'll like combine an exercise and a break, and there'll be a 30-minute gap there. And I'll drive down the street and I'll get some takeaway breakfast and a nice coffee, and I'll come back, and it sort of breaks my day up. So from a purely selfish commercial perspective, it's actually really great. And the more dependent the entire industry is on doing things remotely, frankly, the better it is for me from that respect. But I do miss the social interaction. And maybe the best of both worlds is we get to the point where travel around Australia, pretty easy, which is sort of where we're getting to now. So for those of you from other parts of the world, the last state in Australia to sort of drop their restrictions was Western Australia. I believe they're doing that very, very shortly. We've had like one little cluster down in South Australia in Adelaide, which looks like the whole thing's under control. A little bit of a concern about an incident in Sydney at the moment, but there's basically no community transmission of COVID in the country. We still have COVID cases, but they're inbound travellers in hotel quarantine. So we're at a point going into Christmas where everyone can travel around the country without restriction. There's lots of flights there, I know, because I've just been booking them for my parents and my kids and things like this. We go to restaurants and things like that. There's still the only time I've ever worn a mask is to go into the Apple shop, because there's no COVID anywhere that's being community transmitted. So like Australia's in great shape. Now, if my middle ground is I do events in Sydney and Melbourne, and I do them on the weeks where the kids are with their mum and not with me, so I get to break things up a little bit. And then I do video stuff for the US and Europe and things like that. Maybe that's the best of both worlds. I still get community interaction, but I just don't get to see other countries. Eric, I'm sad Scott is not here. Really? Everything always gets even more entertaining when Troy and Scott are interacting. I'll tell you, I'll give you a little bit of Scott. So Scott and I were chatting this morning. It's always fun to get up and read his messages. Now, I don't know if I can read this. He's complaining about someone on Twitter, and in fact, he hasn't actually sent me the tweet. No, I can't even read this. But things that get taken off Twitter So you will make a tweet about something. So he's made a tweet about something which was fairly innocent, and someone has picked it up and gone very, very, let's say very, very greeny on him. And his response to that was quite entertaining, but I think it would be disingenuous for me to read the exact words he wrote here. Plus, I don't think I'm allowed to say some of these on YouTube. So we'll use your imagination on that one. Tennis, one-handed backhand or double? One-handed, because in my generation, shit, that sounds old. Because when I was a kid learning to play, guys did one-handed, girls did two-handed. Now, it's very different today. I mean, other than like Roger Federer, most men are doing double-handed backhands, including my son, double-handed backhand. But yeah, one-handed for me. I'm too old to change that, too set in my ways. Could you, someone else here, Strata Strong says, could you imagine what someone that navigated via stars hundreds of years ago think of sat-nav? The problem is even the sat-nav's not particularly reliable. So yesterday we had our neighbours over, next door neighbours had just done part of this same trip that we're about to do, and they'd driven from Mount Isa to Alice Springs, and I'm showing them on the map where we're going, and they're like, you can't go through there. You're like, you can't go in a direct line. You need to go that way. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like the Google Maps is literally saying go this way, and it doesn't say there's a dirt road or anything. And then I go into Apple Maps, and Apple Maps says, no, you've got to do 300 kilometers more in one day that was already a long day around that way. Anyway, apparently Google Maps is trying to send me on like a four-wheel drive track or something like that in my Mercedes sedan. So you can't even trust the maps. This is the thing, like the sat-nav. And it does worry me a little bit, because I can imagine like one of these massively long days where you end up suddenly on a dirt track getting worse and worse in the middle of the bloody outback with no signal or anything like that. So we've got to be a bit cautious about that. So they said, no, you got to go this way, and you got to go through Tennant Creek. And they said, now try not to get out of your car at Tennant Creek. You know, like there's a reason why. I think they said even the police station's surrounded in barbed wire. So like, okay, let's wonder how far we can get out of a tank. Can we avoid having to stop in Tennant Creek? So I think that like the GPS is awesome, and don't get me wrong, I prefer that as opposed to navigating by the stars. But yeah, it is fascinating. You know, it's fascinating. Think back to even just let's say 20 years ago. We didn't really have many GPS devices for consumers in cars 20 years ago. How did we get around 20 years ago? Yeah, we had the physical maps, but that was a pain. Or I heard Mikko Hyppinen doing a talk last year where he was talking about, I think in sort of the early 90s, he and some friends had done a trip around Europe, and he says, I can't even remember how we found the hotels because there was no internet. Like, did we use a phone book or brochures, or how did we do it? And these, for many of us, are times that are in recent enough memory that it's kind of strange that it's so difficult to remember what that was actually like. Eric, what front-end development strategy would you recommend focusing on what you believe will sustain the longest benefit over time? The longest benefit over time for front-end development, HTML and JavaScript. How about that? Look, beyond that, I'm so out of sync with things like frameworks and so on at the moment. That's about all I can offer. Jonathan, what's your thoughts about Amazon Sidewalk and new threat vectors from that? Distributed Wi-Fi bandwidth sharing with neighbors being automatically enabled on Alexa devices is opt-out. Now, I have to learn more about this because I, like many other people, got the Amazon Sidewalk email. And to be honest, I still don't quite understand it. So I've got to go and read this. But it looks like if you have Amazon devices, they can somehow communicate to other Amazon devices that may not be the ones in your home and sort of share some connectivity, or it sounds kind of funky. Funky being a very kind term to say weird and possibly massive privacy issue. But Amazon is also the sort of organization that is very aware of that kind of stuff. Not to say that they always do it in the way that we'd like them to, but they're certainly very aware of it because they've got enough smart people. So I'd like to learn more about that before passing a comment on it. But I probably should, given I have 2 Amazon Echo Dots in this house. Do you think, Perry Toon, do you think real-time email block lists still have value? Real-time, I'm not sure what I mean by a real-time email block list. Eric says, wait, someone is giving Scott or you crap on Twitter. about a relatively innocent. What a surprise. So I actually asked Scott for a link to the tweet because every now and then when someone's being a dickhead to either him or I, we do like to share that with each other and have a bit of a laugh via our back channel, possibly chime in. So I have asked for this. Apparently it is the one where, so people can go and find this themselves. And if you find this, please send it to me because Scott couldn't find it. It's the one where, what can I read out of this? Beeping, moaning about remote start killing dolphins or some shit. Like defrosting the car with me in it or my house makes any beeping difference. So Scott was doing a bit of tinkering with his car, and he set up a remote start facility so that he can obviously be inside the house and start it to warm the car up, because in some places in the world it's cold. Anyway, apparently someone is very unhappy that the car might be running without him in it because of the dolphins. And the only other thing he said in here is that someone has quote tweeted it. It's always a little bit passive aggressive, isn't it? A quote tweet when you're angry with someone. So rather than just engaging with them, it's like you pick the tweet up and you broadcast it to your audience to express how upset you are. Now, I think there are cases where that makes sense, but very often, and again, I haven't seen the tweet. If someone finds it, please copy me into that thread, just for my amusement. But this is one of these cases where it seems like it's just it's probably unnecessary. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up there because I've been going for an hour now, and I do have other things to go and do, including hitting that wakeboard park sometime today. Next week, I will be in a much more rural location than this, and I don't know whether I'm going to be doing it in the morning or the evening. I'm going to try and do a live stream sometime on a Friday. It might be a shorter one as well, but I'm going to try and do them on a Friday, and I'm going to try and do them from cool places. I'm taking all of that stuff on the back wall, which is camera equipment and tripods and things like that. So hopefully I can make a fairly good effort out of it, but we'll see. It should be entertaining if nothing else. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next week.